As a kid, I had two distinct passions. I loved all things art and I loved history. History was distant despite my interest in finding out about my identity. But art gave me comfort from its consistency. I've been painting since I was 3, dancing since I was 7, and writing poetry since I was 9. I was never challenged with art like I had been with history. Overall, I had success in my artistic journey, but understanding Black history was onerous. It was complex and there were so many terms that had left me confused. Now, I could understand their connotations or definitions and I could even grasp their usages, but I didn't get how some of these terms would contradict themselves. I didn't understand why I was labeled as African American, but someone who was white wasn't labeled as European American. Critically acclaimed author Toni Morrison had said, "In this country, American means white, and everybody else has to hyphenate." I felt I had to identify with an entire continent I've never been to, rather than my own country I was born in. School didn't help to clarify these terms either. Most of my social studies classes didn't teach history that represented my heritage. And when it was touched upon, it was only disregarded or spoken in bad taste. Black people were blamed for their struggles in these classes. Class discussions would have non-Black people discussing a disconnect in a community they weren't even a part of. They would point to a lack of a bond and established values in the Black community. This division and lack of foundation in my community had started because of slavery. But I guess I could understand where they were coming from with the way slavery was taught in school. Most of our textbooks only reflected a white man's perspective, and we got a lot of our knowledge from these books. I vividly remember a textbook activity where we had to list out the pros and cons of slavery, and then treat the pros as an equal opinion to abolition. I didn't understand why we were listing out the benefits of dehumanizing an entire race. This apathetic way of teaching left holes in my learning. Although it was a difficult topic, I was determined to continue through it. At 13 years old, I was still looking for a connection, a bridge between art and history. The lack of representation in history had me longing for something to validate my identity. So I went on the look for a historical book that I could see myself in. I picked up a biography of Josephine Baker. She's a jazz icon known for her banana skirts and dancing the Charleston. She was also a prominent figure in the Harlem Renaissance, which was a Black artistic movement that lasted from the 1920s to 30s. It was the first time I was able to see the clear connection between art and history. From that point on, I researched everything I could about the movement. It mostly created more questions, but it opened a door for me. I didn't just see myself as African American. I saw myself as Black. The Harlem Renaissance has formed cultural bonds from the ashes. It created the Black experience from trauma and dehumanization of slavery. And that's when it hit me. The mystery behind my ancestry was hidden among the art I loved. My identity was wrapped in Black culture, and that culture was fueled by art. These art pieces and creators had produced bonds, experiences, and an entire community. Slavery had erased the humanity of Black people, but art, such as hairstyles or spirituals, kept our spirits alive. This discovery led me to seek out other historic art events. I stumbled upon Jacob Lawrence's Migration series. These paintings depicted the journey that Black people took from the segregated South to the urban North in search for new job opportunities. I then ended up finding out about Norman Rockwell's painting, The Problem We All Live With. It showcased the torment 6-year-old Ruby Bridges' experience as she integrated our educational system. Ruby Bridges is 66 years old, and she's the reason why I'm able to attend Dublin City schools. I researched these art pieces for history projects that greatly diverge from the content we were taught in class. Other cases of art were unfolding as I looked into the art embedded into the civil rights movement by Harlem Renaissance artists. These artists heavily contributed and greatly influenced the movement, and there were good reason for their involvement. They lived and performed through segregation. Artists like Josephine Baker pointed out the hypocrisy of performing in a restaurant she couldn't eat in and a hotel she couldn't sleep in. The discrimination she faced in America led her to travel to France later on in her career. Before her move, her experiences had led her to advocate for civil liberties. There was also art in the civil rights movement where I wasn't expecting it to be. MLK's speeches were way beyond speeches. They encompassed poetry and rhythm. His tone changes and his boasting voice made his words sound as though they were practically sung. The more research I did, the more ties I found between art and history. It still took me a long time to credit artists like NWA for more than just their incredible beats and flows. They also created poetry that analyzed the nightmare of living in the ghetto. However, they were demonized and blamed for rapid crime rates. Stories that authentically captured the lives of Black people in America were only ever regarded as glamorizations of drugs, gangs, and violence. O'Shea Jackson, aka Ice Cube, had done interviews expecting to be asked about issues plaguing the Black community, such as Rodney King's case. But instead, he was met with questions regarding his songs' popularities in nightclubs. Now, don't get me wrong, he wrote some catchy songs. I mean, who can forget Boys in the Hood, Straight Outta Compton, and Expletive the Police? I mean, you might know it as something else. But he was an activist, and many of his morals and political opinions were woven into his songs. Ice Cube wrote in the famous NWA song, Expletive the Police, "Got it back 'cause I'm brown and not the other color, so police think they have the authority to kill a minority." These lyrics predated the tragedy of Rodney King almost losing his life to police brutality and an event that would lead to the 1992 LA riots. Ice Cube wasn't acknowledged or even credited for his predictive lyrics, his accurate illustrations, or his outspoken traits. He was villainized. Even Beyonce, Queen Bee, world-renowned artist, and she sold out a couple of international stadiums. Even she was demonized for her Black empowerment songs and Black-based dance performances. One of her most influential songs was Formation, and one of the most groundbreaking performances she had was Baychella, where she brought the HBCU homecoming experience to the Coachella stage. Now, my love for Beyonce went way before those performances. I was 6 years old when I was begging my mom to get me black heels and a black leotard so I can look like Beyonce in Single Ladies. I was also 6 years old when I dived into these two fashion-based TV shows, True Jackson VP and That's So Raven. These shows had one main commonality. They both starred Black teenage fashionistas. They never dodged any important message, even when it was easy to do. They discussed pressing issues in the fashion industry like body shaming. But the issue that stuck out to me, even as a 6-year-old, was the disadvantages with racism. Now, I only had a vague sense of racism at the time because it was before my mama gave me the racism talk. That talk, known by many other names, is basically when Black parents and other parents of colors will discuss racism with their kids in order to prepare them for the world. Now, although there were so many important messages woven into this TV show, I was mainly obsessed with the 90s and early 2000s fashion styles within it. I mean, on my day-to-day, I look like I can be a background character in That's So Raven. I also didn't really pay attention to the messages and that these powerful Black artists put into their works either. That all changed after my journey through Black culture and Black history. I saw a theme. Racism impacted the identity, artistic expression, and culture of Black people. But how did I get away from it? I always believed in valuing the arts for more than just its aesthetics. Arts such as dancing, painting, singing, and even fashion were more than just art. They were a way for me to connect to my purpose and my roots. Art can help deepen the view of Black people as more than just Black, but as people. So many generalizations and stereotypes leave people of color feeling sunken and can even lead to their death. Racism is a vicious weed and the flourishing garden of our diverse community. Obviously, we need to weed it out, but its roots are strangling so many different facets of our lives. Racism is in my life every day and in every way. It's in the clothes I wear, the way I talk, the experiences I have, the paintings I study, and the songs I listen to. Racism was an obstacle in my path and to finding my identity because I was alienated from environments I was supposed to thrive in. I was racially excluded from representation, and my heroes were depicted as ghetto and violent. This obstacle was difficult to get over, but art was my escape. It was my healer. I encourage you all to find your art. Find the beauty in coding, the liveliness in playing football or tennis, the peacefulness in planting. Find it and use it to find a greater sense of yourself and to find compassion. I use art to find myself, my strength, and my sympathy. Thank you.